Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. And as said in the introduction, thank you to the previous speaker for giving such a nice introduction on the real use cases in blockchain. Let me take you back to yesterday evening when I was flying into Riga. So everybody knows the story more or less. Arrived at the airport, had to go in the car lock, had to prove my identity, had to give my ID card. So went into the airport, boarding, show my ID card. Arriving in Riga, show my ID card. I arrived at the hotel, I showed my ID card. And everything just to prove my identity. So that's from the perspective of the corporate, the government, the organization which is actually behind it. But me as an individual, I don't want to share my personal data with everybody and everything. I want to get control over that information. The point that I want to make is we are living in a changing world. We are living in a global world, a globalization in the world, and we are traveling, companies are cross-border working, we are working in ecosystems. And not only as companies or organizations, but also as individuals. If you see how many people attend this conference, you know that this is an ecosystem as well. Also, we are enabled in that by the new technologies that are there. You will see like speech recognition, natural language processing, those type of things. And all of those technologies and all of those new types of services, they actually built a new society. They built a very diverse society. We can now reach the stars. We have full traceability of our food. Also, everything in health is evolving very fast. We can even 3D print our meat. The question is, if I'm standing in front, in a supermarket in front of the refrigerator, is that meat, is that really safe? And I trust that supermarket, or I trust the producer. But what is the trust? If I buy Captain Iglo, fish sticks, everybody knows fish sticks. Huh? Who in this room thinks that the guy who is with his picture on the fish sticks really catched that fish which is in the box? I think nobody. Huh? So that's the point. We trust it because it's a brand. Now, there is one big issue here. Because how much of my information, how much information do I need to give value to my customer, to give value to my citizen, to give value to my ecosystem partner? That is a big question. But also, how do I treat that information? If I would ask anybody in this room, except for my colleagues from Accenture, of course, if I would ask anybody in this room, how are you? You will most probably respond to me, well, I'm fine. But if your mother would ask you, how are you? Then you would say, well, I had a hard time at work, or I'm feeling a little bit ill. You're giving more information. And why is that? It's because you're trusting that person. Trust is a very big thing if you want to provide those new types of services. Question is, for example, here you can see a video of traffic. So do I really want to give my position to improve traffic and even to actually forecast where the traffic jams will be? Or do I really want to have a robot that will put my kids into bed and read a story to them? So question is, how much value do I get back for what I'm giving? And that is where distributed ledger technology or blockchain steps in. Because we see a big tech clash. We want to have individualized services, services that we actually potentially do not need, that we already need them. And we want to have them now, while we do not want to give all of the information to it. And trust is a very important given in there. Now, let me move into some real examples. When we want to buy products, for example, we want to be able to individualize them. I want to be able to choose the color. I want to be able to choose the brand. I want to whatever. And how can we do that? That's by building a digital twin. A digital twin is actually a representation of that person, of that product, of that identity, whatever, in a virtual world. And that is where we end up already in the first big hurdle that we meet. When we use distributed ledger technology, we need to link the physical world into the virtual world, and we use a digital twin. So the process in between the physical and the digital world, that translation, that's a very important step. And distributed ledger technology, or blockchain, however you want to call it, is actually only there to protect your information once it is already a digital twin, or to make that digital twin. But how do you get that information in there? There is still a need for audit processes there, potentially, or other types of Internet of Things related information gathering that you use to get that information into that virtual world. So people saying that blockchain distributed ledger will actually give you a 100% foolproof solution, I don't believe them, because that is one of the hurdles. A second hurdle, and that is also when we talk into a corporate environment, and when I'm talking about corporate, I'm talking about organizations and governments as well, is the fact that the technology now, okay, we can be pretty much sure that it is safe for the next 5, potentially 10 years. Well, nobody can look into the future. We do not know how technology is evolving. If we are looking into how quantum computing, for example, is progressing, that is impacting a lot how we will be using and how safe blockchain is, or distributed ledger technology. So that is also one of the reasons why we strongly believe when we talk about distributed ledger technology solutions in a corporate environment, we always talk about permission blockchains, and in 99% of the time in private blockchains, just to protect that information which is in there. So let's go into a number of real use cases. First one, and this is a use case which is built for the city of Antwerp, which is a city in Belgium, in Flanders. And it's just one of the use cases here where a person, she just moved into the city of Antwerp, and she goes to the doctor. Now, typically, when you go to the doctor for the first time, you trust that that doctor is really a doctor. When we were doing this project together with the client, we did some research, and we find some articles about a doctor that was teaching nurses for 15 years, 15 years, with a fake degree. He just photoshopped a degree which was hanging on the wall, and nobody checked it. So with this solution, what happens is the patient steps in at the doctor's office, and the doctor asks, "Can I get access to your personal information?" The doctor scans a snowflake or QR code on the patient's mobile phone, and the patient actually selects what information is disclosed to that doctor. Also, when he or she changes doctor afterwards, she can stop disclosing that information, and that information will no longer be visible. So what you see in the video here is that all of that information is disclosed actually without any single form. There is no paper involved in here. This use case actually goes way beyond this. Because in this case, Sophie, our protagonist in this video, she's actually pregnant. So Sophie, she delivers the baby, but before delivering the baby, she needs to recognize the father. And she can do that by using this app as well. So again, by exchanging that information using a blockchain solution. And once the baby is born, the doctor is born virtually then as well, of course, the doctor actually again scans the QR code of Sophie, and at that moment, an instance of that child is made on the blockchain with the weight and with the length, and in that way, all the live events of that child can start to be recorded on blockchain as well. Lastly, but not the least, is Sophie and her husband, they move because their apartment is a little bit too small for the kids. So they move into a new office. And in Belgium, we still have the law that when you move, a police officer needs to pass by, and they need to check whether you are actually living at the address, which is a huge administrative burden. So how did we solve that? There are two solutions in that we found together with the client. First of all, you can have your neighbors upvoting you. So they actually scan your QR code, and they confirm on blockchain that person is really living there. And when you have, for example, 20 neighbors upvoting you, then your address is officially changed using a smart contract. A second solution, and this might be a little bit more GDPR non-compliant, is where we actually store the GPS location on blockchain. We don't disclose that information with anybody. Only that individual has access to the information. And we do that for the next coming 3-4 weeks. And then a smart contract runs on top of the blockchain, and it actually identifies that person has been 90% of the time overnight at that address. So we change the address because we can assume that that person really moved there. And that is one of the big advantages of blockchain. Blockchain has the advantage that you can actually leverage the functional use of data without excluding that data itself. I did not exclude my GPS location to anybody because everybody trusts the information on the distributed ledger, and a smart contract which is running on top of that is trusted as well by everybody. Everybody trusts the outcome as well. And in that way, just similar to the person before me who was actually telling the story about proving your age, you can actually just get a yes or a no without really proving your age or showing your birthday. Let me give you a second example. Second example is Zurich Insurance, and this project is live for about 2 years now, and it's about surety bonds. And surety bonds is actually a principle in which project coordinators and development companies, project development companies, they need to build up surety bonds for cases of issues, late delivery, and those type of things. Meaning that, for example, if you have 100 surety bonds to cover you for a late delivery, when you are already at 50% of your delivery, you might be able to sell 50% of your surety bonds, and you can invest them in another project. So there's a whole market around this. There are a lot of stakeholders in here. You have architects, you have experts, you have the customers buying apartments, you have the project developers. So the insurance companies, banks, a lot of involvement is here. The point why I want to use this is here blockchain was differentiating because it actually gives and aggregates the information immediately on the fly. But also, and this is very important, what we learned in the past 5 to 6 years is blockchain or distributed ledger, it's a simple database. And our customers are typically the digital managers, the innovation managers, and even business people. And those people, what you can do is you can show a database with a really nice API on top of it, and you can shoot an XML file using the API, and then be really proud, like, we put the information on blockchain. And then the business says, what? I don't know what this is. So you really need to think, what is the service that I'm putting on top of it? How do I visualize that additional service? And the additional service, in this case for Zurich Insurance, is that you have at each moment a real-time dashboard. Every of the stakeholders have a real-time dashboard of what the status of my surety bonds, which was a project which is not possible in a traditional technology. A next example is an example that we are doing together with MasterCard, Mercy Corp, and Everledger. And what we are doing here is we are making coffee beans, cacao beans, and any other product traceable. And what's the idea behind it is there is a huge value chain. When, for example, in this case, coffee, from coffee bean to when we drink the coffee. And if I would tell you that, for example, 1 square inch of the rainforest is destroyed, when you drink 1 cup of coffee, that might open your eyes, but you might not be aware of that. And even if those farmers would want to work more sustainable, then they cannot prove, often they cannot prove their identity, nor they can prove what they have been doing in the past, because if they don't have an identity, they have no track record, they cannot prove how much coffee they have been building, whatever. So what we do here in this project is actually we link digital identity into electronic payments together with provenance and traceability using blockchain. So first of all, we provide farmers with an identity using blockchain. So secondly, those farmers, they are registered with a cooperative where they are registered as a supplier of coffee beans. Thirdly, they get certifications there because if they are certified, they get much more money for the product that they're owning and that they're giving. Then all the parties in between, being it the process companies, being it the transport companies, being it the retailers, the warehouses, whatever, all of them are registered on blockchain. And in that way, we can actually fully trace back where the product has been at what time. And that's not only important for the quality of the product, but it's also important because in that way, we can actually get visibility on what happens in that value chain. we can actually take out all of the non-value-added services, like, for example, a transport company handing over to another transport company, handing over to another transport company, taking margin on top, on top, on top, and that way making the product very, very expensive. So that's where the electronic payments step in. And then finally, we have the fully traceability and provenance. And in that way, actually, the consumer, but also all of the other people in between, they can fully trace back where the product has been. And you can actually see the person with a live picture, the farm, if that producer wants, and even with information about that farm, where the coffee has been breeded and where it has been harvested. And in that way, if there's also a possibility to really do a financial incentive directly to that farmer or to that community. So in that way, we combine different technologies to really come up with an end-to-end solution. And that is very important. Distributed ledger technology, it's a solution in specific cases. So it's not a solution for all cases. That's the first element. The second element is combine it with other technologies, like applied intelligence, electronic payments, whatever, extended reality even. And in that way, you are actually enabling new services that were not able to be enabled in a more traditional company. Maybe in between of the last example, I just want to share another example that we have done also for the Flemish government, and that's where we have given an identity to land, to valuable nature land, meaning that now land, up till now, land was owned by an individual. And if you want to have that evolving into valuable nature land, you get subsidies by the government, but there is no proof that you use those subsidies in the next 30 years really to improve that land. That's the first element. Second element, if that land would be sold, then the money would still be owned by the previous owner, not by the new owner. And you need to go through a process of more than a year to get the subsidies transferred onto the new owner. Also, what do the owners of the adjacent pieces of land, what do they do? So we use a blockchain solution, and we actually gave the piece of land an identity on the blockchain. And the subsidies are actually now assigned to that piece of land. And we linked a fictive coin to it, the nature coin, which is actually a representation of 1-to-1 with a euro. And in that way, construction workers or people that are maintaining that piece of land, they are actually paid in those nature coins. And in that way, we actually know that those nature coins are really used for managing that land. The final solution is one that we are doing together with the United Nations, and it's called ID 2020. And ID 2020 has the objective of giving everybody in the world the basic human right of having an identity. And a first version of ID 2020 is actually already live and being used without blockchain. Now we are testing and deploying solutions with blockchain, in which people, when they enter into a United Nations enrollment statement, their identity is stored on blockchain using certifications, but also specific information can be stored, like health information or like information about diplomas and those type of things. And that actually means that once you are enrolled there, that when you move into another country, you can actually share that identity again with that country. And in that way, you do not need to go through the whole complex process of showing your identity time and over and over and over again, but it also gives more security to the countries. So this is very similar to the project that we did with the city of Antwerp, being it on a much larger scale. Also bringing it back to me traveling. Imagine that I get robbed or I forgot my passport in my hotel. It will take me most probably 2 days to, even within the Schengen zone, to get my identity back because I need to go to the embassy, whatever. And that's a huge burden. Imagine if we would use one of these solutions and my identity would actually be known, and I would manage my identity on a blockchain solution. So to conclude, it all comes back to identity, digital twin. Digital twin of products, digital twin of a land, digital twin of a person, digital twin of a virtual person, whatever. That's the first thing. Second thing is, think about the additional services that you can bring on top of your solution. So do not do a technical upgrade by using blockchain for the sake of blockchain. What is the additional service that you can bring on top of it? And finally, also represented service. Blockchain is not a solution for everything, so you can only convince people by showing how it works, by doing it. My name is Ghelen, and here you can find my social media coordinates. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I will be around as well for any further discussions. Thank you.